people are traumatized. One woman met me outside the church, and she said, "Padre, siento que están cazándonos como si fuéramos animales. I feel like they're hunting us as if we were animals." So if you feel hunted, it's like that movie, The Hunger Games, right? Those contestants were in this constant state of fear that they were being hunted. Well, that's what a good number of people who sit in these pews on Sunday are feeling is that sense of being hunted.
It's that time of the year, the holiday season, where for a lot of us, that means being with our family, gifts, big meals for sure, maybe a moment to reflect on the year that's passed and the year that's coming. In my tradition, we celebrate Christmas. And I've been thinking about the part of the story that doesn't always gets the attention or gets told. A young couple with nowhere to stay, a mother giving birth far from home, a family that would soon have to flee to protect their child. We call that the Holy Family, the Sagrada Familia. But if they showed up today, we might have another name for them. Welcome to Dreaming Big, Working Hard. I'm David Alvarez. I represent the communities here in San Diego just along the California border with Mexico, where that story isn't just ancient history. It's happening right now. Today, I'm sitting down with Father Scott Santarosa. He's my priest. He's the pastor of Our Lady Guadalupe here in Barrio Logan, where my family and I worship on a weekly basis on Sunday. He comes from a tradition that says your faith should show up in your life, that what you believe has to shape what you do, who you are. A tradition that's always asked hard questions about who gets included and who gets left out. He's put that into practice in powerful ways, organizing demonstrations, accompanying families to immigration court, opening our church as a place of refuge. I grew up in a house where faith wasn't just something that we talked about, it was something that we lived. My parents were immigrants from Mexico to this country. My father worked the fields and worked as a janitor as well. My mother worked in fast food. You've heard that story from me before. They didn't just give us lectures about values, they showed us. They take care of your neighbors. You see and care for those around you, everybody, and see them for who they are. When someone's struggling, you show up. This holiday season, I wanted to have a conversation about that, about faith, not as a set of rules, but as something that shapes who we become and what we do in our lives. Father Scott and I come from the same tradition, and I wanted to sit down with him and talk to him and ask him about all this. Whether you're a person of faith, someone who's searching, or just looking for something meaningful this time of year, I hope this conversation gives you something to take with you. If it does, share it with someone who might also need it. Thank you, Father Scott, for being here. Really a pleasure to be here in my home parish. It's really an honor to be with you, and thank you for joining us.
You're very welcome, David. Great to have you here at your own home.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's been my home. My baptism was back there, and every Sunday we're here with the family. So it's great to be here, and it's really an honor to be able to speak with you. Um, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about your personal journey into into the priesthood, certainly, but also just as a pastor now at this parish. And we'll talk about the work that's happening here a little bit later. But what was your journey like to get
Yeah,
here?
it's a great question. I don't think when I was growing up, I imagined I would be a priest, but I was a public school kid all my life. I grew up mostly in Sacramento, California, and I got this inspiration to go to a Catholic high school,
Mhm.
and one of the Catholic high schools for boys in Sacramento was called Jesuit High School, and at that school, I really felt like I had these guys who were dressed like I am right now in a collar teaching our classes, and I really liked who they were. They were down to earth. They had a sense of humor, and at the deepest level, I felt they were in our corner, and I think that planted a little seed in me to maybe think I wanted to do it too. And over the passage of time, I felt like it was enough of what I wanted to do to try it. And then once I joined, I felt like this is the place for me.
So, what's interesting, I do a lot of work in education. And so I talk a lot about exposing young people to careers and options so that they can see what's available. So, I have curiosity about
Yeah.
your exposure to these men who were leaders and who you looked up to. So, was the seed that was planted at that time at high school, at Jesuit high school, did you know then that you wanted to be a priest or that you wanted to pursue a religious order, or when did that actually become really clear to you while you were in college? I say that because I had no idea when I went to, I was an undeclared major. I did not know what I wanted to do. And it took me a while to figure that out.
Right.
And so just curious about
Well,
you.
I say plant a seed because I would say I came back to what was growing from the seed in the subsequent years, both in college and in a year of volunteer work after
Yeah.
college. And I would say when I thought about being a Jesuit, I got excited and felt a sense of kind of a warmth and attraction. And when I was in college, I studied civil engineering,
Mm.
first at UC Davis and then at Santa Clara. And I remember one summer job, I was working at a small engineering company in Sacramento, and I was drafting. I was at
Mhm.
my draftsman table, and I was changing a parking lot boundary for Tower Records in Sacramento, which was
Oh,
founded
on
in
Broadway,
Sacramento.
right?
That's right.
Yeah.
And I was erasing it, and I was drawing the new proposed line. And I said to myself, my life has to be more than this. So, no offense to any engineers, any drafts persons out there, but I felt like I wanted something more. And the seed that was planted as at Jesuit high school was that held the possibility of more. And then later on, when I was a volunteer 1 year after college, I felt like this is keeps sticking with me. I got to give it a shot.
It's interesting you say that 1 year of volunteer, that experience that you had really directed you. I'll share with you my personal journey into public service, which I feel is also a calling
Of
if
course,
you really do this
has to
for
be a
others.
calling. It has to be.
I it wasn't I did not study politics, never took a political science course. My degree's in psychology. I knew I wanted to help people and in the community. Didn't really know what that meant until I had a fellowship experience of 1 year in Sacramento where I learned that through government you can make a change for the community, and that was really, without that I would not be in politics today. So the other thing I share with a lot of young people all the time, which is go and have internships experiences and see whether it's what you like or what it calls you, because that's the only way you're going to know. So that was what you did, was through the Jesuit Corps.
Jesuit Volunteer
Jesuit
Corps.
Volunteer.
That's
And,
right.
and tell me more about the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And
Yeah, so it's an opportunity for graduates of Jesuit universities and other universities to. It's like now they would say it's like a gap year, right?
Mhm.
That's the terminology now. But in those years, it was more like people that graduating, not sure what they wanted to do, but knew they wanted to be of service in some way. I felt like I wanted to put service on the front burner instead of the back burner. So you could basically devote a year of your life to living in community with other volunteers. You get paid a stipend, not very much. And you work at places that can't afford a full-time employee. So they're usually places that serve low-income populations. So I was in Newark, New Jersey,
Mm,
and I was in subsidized housing area called New Community Corporation,
mhm.
and I ran an after-school program.
Yeah. Wow.
And I agree with you, David. Like, actually trying stuff on is the best way to figure out what you want to do.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
trial and error, kind of.
Yeah. And that's so important for young people to
Yeah,
have that exposure and those opportunities. And
yeah,
I think that's one of the things I like to see happen more in education,
hmm
because, especially for people who come from communities like this one where I
yeah,
came from, and I never knew an engineer or,
right,
any kind of profession, which, as someone who loved math, later on in life, I realized that could have been a career path for me, perhaps,
right,
but I didn't know anything about it, what that meant. And so,
yeah,
that's why I feel strongly that those experiences really matter. But your experience was explicitly Jesuit, and I want to talk about the uh, Saint Ignatius
right.
and where he fits in the Catholic Church, because some people don't understand what that means,
Mhm.
and how the Jesuit community was the right community for you.
Right. So Saint Ignatius was a man from the Basque region of Spain, and he was a vain man and a kind of a mercenary soldier. But he realized that a life lived just for himself was not essentially fulfilling. And it was only after getting a cannonball to his leg and convalescing in his castle
Mhm.
in Spain that he became to realize that he wanted to do great things, but not for himself anymore. Now, great things for Christ. and he wanted to imitate the saints that he read about in the books that they gave him. And I think the great thing that Ignatius gives us is the spiritual exercises, which is a way of discerning God's will and how God is calling us in our lives. So we all want to know, how is God calling me? What's God asking of me? And sometimes we can be tempted to think that we have to wait for a lightning bolt to come from the sky, or for Our Lady to appear in a tortilla to tell us the right way to go. And his thing was, no, actually, you look to your heart and through consolation and desolation, and that's how you know where God and how God is calling you.
Yeah.
And it goes back to our conversation about like the internships, and
Mhm.
because as you're doing those things, you pay attention to what do I like about this, or what do I not like about this, and there's the roadmap for for a person to discern where God is calling them.
Yeah. I had the real amazing opportunity of doing the spiritual exercises. I did the 8 days
Nice.
version in Puente Grande, Jalisco, in
Oh, very
Mexico,
good.
and I did that right after my first career in politics, which was a city
Right,
council member here in San
right.
Diego, and it was a tremendous experience that I was able, only time of my life that I have accurately journaled and photojournaled that experience, because it was life changing. People talk about life changing experiences all the time. For me, it certainly was, and um, even in my decision later on in life to return to politics after being away for 4 years, after actually in my spiritual exercises, my discernment led me to not continue in politics for
Hmm.
4 years. It was not the right time of my life at that point to do that. Actually, when I decided to run for the position I have now in the state assembly, it came in really important that I had the spiritual exercises and I used them very closely to the experience that I had while I was away for 8 days in silence. I actually was at the steps of this church often for quite a few days as I was trying to figure out, do I want to do this again? Meaning, do
Hmm.
I want to run for public office again? And I had a pretty comfortable, calm life being out of politics. And it was that process that led me to really identify that this is who I really am and who I've been called to be, which is to serve other people, and that this was an opportunity. And I found tremendous peace in that. I
That's
think that's
great.
one of the things I remember from the spiritual exercises. So when I talk to people now about decisions that I make, which are never easy, and you always disappoint someone when you're voting for
Mhm.
things or against things, uh, you have to find the peace to be able to move on and continue. And the exercises have really helped me literally on a daily basis to be able to make decisions like that. And I think that's the gift that I've received from the exercises that have been tremendous for me personally. And highly recommend. There's 3 day versions of this. There's an 8 day version, and there's a 30 day version, right?
That's
The
right.
exercises.
There's also a way you can do it in your daily life. It's called the 19th annotation, which
Mm,
means basically you take one of those meditations and you do it each morning as opposed to 5 times a day, which you were probably doing when you were on the 8 day.
yeah,
But that's great. I didn't know that
yeah,
about your discernment. And you know what? It goes back to shows that you could have gone right back into politics, but you didn't. And it's because it wasn't the right time. And that's what's so important about discernment, is not just what am I supposed to do, but when.
right.
And the fact that you go back to that, even as you make hard decisions, and basically you're saying you're going to even to your conscience, like
Mhm.
what must I do in this given moment in time? I have
Yeah.
very limited options. It's yes or no, and what's the decision that is you know of
Right.
my heart and of God?
But
Good for you.
we all make decisions every day that we could rely on, whether it's the exercises or some other type of prayer or faith, or process to make those decisions, because we all have difficult decisions every single day,
That's
right?
right.
And you have parishioners from all walks of life here,
That's right.
um, from people who are recent immigrants to this country to people. This parish is pretty well established. There's some people who come to this parish that have been coming here for generations.
That's right.
And so I'm sure you see all walks of life and people who are making decisions during this time of the year in particular, a special time of the year. What are people coming to you, obviously outside uh, 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 from confession, which are all things that are kept between themselves in their confession process. But generally, the community, what is the community saying? What are you hearing? Because I noticed that you do that every Sunday you're here, whether you give a mass or not, you're outside shaking hands, saying hello. I'm sure you're hearing from people, whether it's after mass on a Sunday or some of the families who come to school. You have a school
Mhm.
here. What are we hearing from the community of faith?
Well, we're hearing that a lot of people are afraid and alone, or they feel like even if their immigration status is secure, I think that so much of the rhetoric now is anti-immigrant. Whether people have documents or not, they feel like it targets them in a really ugly way. So I think one of the things that we try to say to people and to be for people is a presence that says, first of all, I see you, I hear you, and God loves you.
Mhm.
And that we all, each and every single one of us, is made in the image and likeness of God without exceptions. And in a real way, but in God's eyes, we all have documents. There's not the haves and the have nots. It's everyone has that deep identity as God's sons and
Yeah.
daughters. So that's I think the pervading message we try to provide. All of us priests, all of us ministers here at the church is you belong here. I mean, you see it on the words outside the church. We have the two banners. We belong. Nosotros pertenecemos. We have the flags of all the nations of the country streaming out there to help people to know that in this place, everyone is welcome. We are all valued. We all belong. But because we're hearing from people of their fear and their worry and their preoccupation and they're doubting their own worth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that you said at the end is maybe some of the most devastating feelings. The lack of self worth is can lead to
Absolutely.
so many things.
Absolutely. We know that young people are struggling with that a great deal through social media and various messages that want to convince them that they're not enough or they're not good enough or they're not popular enough or pretty enough or tall enough or whatever. And I think it's and just add on to that just this base level of I would say degradation of immigrants and people of color.
Mhm.
So then that's a lot that people are carrying.
Yeah.
That's a lot that people carry. So I think what we try to do here, David, is give people like an hour's vacation from all those negative voices to come here, let down your load, and feel again that God was with you and God loves you. And I see you and your family every Sunday about in the same place over there. And I know you need it
Mhm.
because that's why you're here every Sunday. And I know I need it too. Like I like coming to mass, but I like coming to mass because I'm with people that want to be here because we all need it. We need each other.
Yeah, certainly on a Sunday during mass service, I think I really like how you expressed it as a vacation. It's certainly um, a stepping back of everything else that's
That's
happening
right.
on a regular basis on top of what's happening now, which I definitely want to talk to you more about. But your point about the just looking around, and I think maybe all of you priests who give mass here ask us to look around all the
Yeah.
time at
I
each
yeah.
other and see us for who we are. And I think just even that instant alone, for me anyway, helps me be grounded in the reality of who I am and where I belong, which is among the people of our community. Um, but also, with my own history, my parents who, when they came to this country, this was their parish. And so now I, in many occasions, see, you know, it's like that could be been my parents when they first came to this country, or when they were older and they came to mass here, for the seniors that sit here at the front row, and the care that we give to them, and the when the Eucharist is taken to the sick, that the blessing that happens. And so many instances of our lives where we're connected to what happens in church, I think is grounds me, and I know for others as well.
Right.
I do want to talk a little bit more about the spiritual exercises because I get a lot of, it's. I will say this to everybody: it's often hard for people to think that you have real conversations when you're in politics that are
Mm,
legitimate conversations.
yeah,
I would say because a lot of people have transactional conversations
yeah,
just about what they want and so I think I surprise a lot of people in Sacramento who once I feel a level of comfort, I start talking about, and I always for some reason tend to land with the spiritual exercises and why I do what I do. They ask me about my family, how they're doing, and I have to go away for a week usually to be in Sacramento to do my work, and so how hard that is, and but why I continue, why I believe in this work, and why I do this work, and so again, I tend to always share with them about my experience with the spiritual exercises. I'd like you to share perhaps, uh, and you've done already a good job of basically um, bringing it down to a level that can be comprehended. But I often hear from other people saying it reminds me of like Buddhism or other things that they've heard about or other experiences that they've had. Can you share why this is a little bit different? The exercises are different than perhaps just reflection, and there is a lot of reflection in the
yeah.
exercises.
That's right.
But maybe share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, for Saint Ignatius, they were clearly oriented towards Christ. And I mean, he says at the very beginning of the spiritual exercises in the principle and foundation that we are all created, all things are held in creation kind of equally, and we choose those things which take us closer to God, and we don't choose those things which take us farther away from God. So it's lest we can sometimes and I don't want to say water down the exercises because people still find in them great meaning a sense of the divine. But I would say sometimes we can use language which is less ostensibly Christian. But for Ignatius, make no mistake, he was Catholic, he was
Mhm.
Christian, and this was oriented towards, the Trinity.
Yeah.
He has a meditation where the Trinity is looking down on the earth. This is the meditation on the incarnation and saying, "Oh my God, look how bad it is in a way.
Mhm.
What are we going to do?" And the second person of the Trinity steps forward and says, "I will go." And then that's the incarnation of
Mhm.
Jesus in Bethlehem, the second
Mhm.
person of the Trinity being sent by the first person of the Trinity, God the Father. So all of this is deeply Catholic for Ignatius. Um, and at the same time, its principles can be used in other ways that are really helpful to people.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the favorite ways that Ignatius talks about um, the evil spirit is we can think of the evil spirit as like the devil, the two horns and da, da, da. And I think that's kind of dumbing down the evil spirit. He calls it the enemy of our human nature. And we all know that sometimes we do things that lead us to a greater fulfillment, and sometimes we follow a voice that leads us to less fulfillment.
Mhm.
It's a voice which gets us to compare ourselves to others and come up less than, or we do things because we want someone to like us, but it doesn't really make us happy. That's the voice of the enemy of our human nature. And I think that's a helpful way to say it. And that's not traditional. Doesn't say Satan.
Mhm.
He says the enemy of our human spirit. I just think it's super helpful. So I think what Ignatius has done is it put in helpful language uh, really deeply Christian and Catholic principles, which can then be applied to other people in a lot of different ways.
Let me ask you about. I've read some biographies on Saint Ignatius, and hope to one day. I've never traveled to Europe. I'm actually hoping that next year is our first trip as a family, and I'll be going. And I told my wife I want to go to Manresa, a
Yeah,
very important place for
beautiful, beautiful.
Saint Ignatius. Uh, but a couple of things. His life was non-traditional. You already said a little bit about this, but he wanted to be almost like revered in some
Yeah,
ways
he did.
until he had that unfortunate accident, which left him bedridden for many months.
Right.
Um, and that's where he finally picked up, I think, a Bible and a book on the saints, and
That's
sort
right.
of started on a journey. But then even after that, I remember, if correct me please if I'm wrong, but then he had a realization like, am I doing this for just myself still, like the reflection of the enemy, as you just stated, or am I doing this because it's leading me to God, and finding God in all things, as is a phrase that's commonly used in Jesuit spirituality. And so it wasn't like a linear direction, which I think we often think, especially those of us, a lot, oftentimes I'll just say Catholics, like all saints had this linear, trajectory where they were always like going in the direction of doing great works and good things for others. We think of people like Mother Teresa, who's now a saint, but Saint Ignatius was not like that, right? He had these like, and then he had that fork in the road, right, where he had the decision to make, I believe,
Right.
which way to go. So can you talk more about him as a person?
Yeah, I think that is he was a person. He was a life and flesh and blood human being just like the rest of us. And we always have to remember that with saints, every saint has a past. So he himself would admit to having his sinful past. And every sinner has a future.
Mhm.
And so God can take any one of us and call us where we are. Always calls us right here and right now where we are, and takes the flesh and blood person that we are and leads us to a new place. So you're right. He was a very vain person. He was wanting to win the hand of a beautiful woman. He wanted to be popular in the court. That's why when he had his leg, when he had the accident, his leg was healing in a crooked way. So he had it rebroken so that it would
Right.
look good in the court.
Yeah.
This is a vain man. I would even say that his call to follow God had some vanity in it. Like
Hmm.
he wanted to be great like the other saints. Almost you
Right.
can hear him whine, I can outdo Dominic. I can outdo Francis.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that over the course of his life, all of that had to be baked out of him.
Mhm.
And it is. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about God is God's always working on us. And even Ignatius in his later years, all of that stuff had to be kind of taken
Mhm.
away. It's interesting is that so when you do go to Europe, which I hope you get to go, and if you ever get to Rome, which I'm sure you
Yeah.
will, you'll get to see the rooms of Ignatius where he spent his final years. And he spent his final years in doing a lot of administration.
Mhm.
And that's not what first caught him. He wanted to do all these exciting things for God. But in the end, he realized the greater good, I can be of greater service by administering this religious order that I have founded. He wrote letters and letters and letters to Jesuits asking about what's happening, giving them direction. That was where God was calling him.
Mhm.
And the end, not in the beginning, but in the end. So you can see the evolution of his call over time. But that's what discernment means. It's never that God calls you to one thing and it's static.
Yeah.
It's God calls you, and then once within the call, might call you to something else or a variation, or and we see that in the life of Ignatius.
And maybe to wrap up this piece of the conversation on Ignatian spirituality, I would ask, or I would make a comment and ask you to respond or reflect on one of the things that I feel like the spirituality is that it's while it's definitely Catholic and Christian, there's it's also very non-judgmental. I feel like when I had the experience of the exercises, I sort of grew in a way that I felt more at ease with the differences that existed, even if you were not Catholic, Christian, or certainly participating in like a Jesuit spirituality type of community. And like I noticeably noticed that that there's a lot of that. There's a lot of social justice, which that's I definitely want to talk about that and what's happening in social justice work that you're doing here. But there's that uniqueness, and maybe it's not unique, but that's certainly something I've experienced.
Right. The fourth week of the exercises ends with a person enjoying the joy of the resurrection of Jesus, and this sense of God's spirit being in all
Mhm.
things and God laboring in creation. So when you go through the exercises, the place that drops you off is that place where you're actually seeing God laboring in all things, in all nature, in all people, in all things, in all events of our lives. And when you look at it that way, it's harder to judge, to be a judgmental person. Because when we judge, we're basically saying we know something and we're right, and someone else doesn't know something and they're wrong. Whereas that really, I would say, that spirit of finding God in all things is counter to that.
Right. Right. I would say what I walked away with that I sort of remember the most. There were so many lessons, and again, I was uh, accidentally, because I never journaled in my life before, but I happened to bring a journal and I notated all of the reflections I could remember at the end of the day. The word that sort of the one word that stands out of the fourth week, if you will, which is the end of the exercises, is just thankful, being thankful.
Mhm.
And like when you find yourself of being thankful, you do find God in all things. Like everything has a value and a purpose, and like everything is there for a reason, and it just brings a whole bunch of other things, a lot of other goodness. And sometimes I'll just tell you, sometimes I feel really worried about how thankful I am for all the good things that I've identified in my life on a daily basis, and concerned that when something that is more harsh or that happens in my life, what, how am I going to react to that moment, given
Mhm.
how much of a feeling of 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 joy, I guess, exists.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like my only fear, if you will.
Yeah, and I think, David, that's you have to trust that. I think we all have to trust in the foundation that we have, which is built up every Sunday that you're here and every day that you pray, is that God is going to give you and me the wherewithal to handle anything that comes our way. Someone just said to me, he's a father of kids. He says, I've given them unconditional love, which of course is tested. You don't know it's unconditional until one condition comes along that makes you think, is this
Yeah.
unconditional or not? But life naturally tests us,
Mhm.
and we have to trust that we have the basic building blocks to keep going in a faithful
Yeah.
way. The sense that God really is with us.
Well, that leads me to the moment that we are in, that there's some fear, there's some hopelessness, there's some despair that I sense. I will just admit myself, and I've said something to this effect publicly already. What's happening in our country, particularly with our immigrant community, is 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 not only is it tragic, but it's traumatic. I grew up with parents who were
Mhm.
undocumented,
Yeah, wow.
and to not feel something, like, I think a lot of those feelings were really stored away for
Mhm,
many, many years, and they've come out more
mhm.
recently as a result of what's happening. I'm obviously not in any danger whatsoever. I'm a US citizen, so are my children. Most of my loved ones, I do have family members who are undocumented and others who don't have citizenship, but yet, like, the fear is there. And so the work that you are doing in this parish, and that our community of faith is doing at large, and there's a lot going on. I certainly want you to hopefully share with us what's happening. Is trying to meet that moment that is, while it's perhaps people can think it's targeting only a certain group of individuals, it's really out there more than just that. I mean, I hear it from my kids who ask, and there's no reason for them to be fearing a moment like this, but
Mm,
they're wondering what's going to happen. So
yeah,
that's out there. It's real.
that is real. It is real. It is traumatic, I think. People are traumatized. One woman met me outside the church and she said, Padre, siento que están cazándonos como si fuéramos animales.
Mhm.
I feel like they're hunting us as if we were animals. So if you feel hunted, it's like that movie, The Hunger Games, right? Those contestants were in
Right.
this constant state of fear that they were being hunted. Well, that's what that's what a good number of people who sit in these pews on Sunday are feeling is that sense of being hunted. And it really is hard to stay hopeful. And yet we are called to be people of hope. So, gosh, where does that come from, you know? So I think so here's a little example of I think how and where we find hope and agency. Is we organized a vigil at the federal building because we found out that ICE was incarcerating people, detaining people in the basement, and they were not revealing anything about that process, who was there, how many days, etc. Our own congressman tried to gain access and was denied twice. So we felt like we needed to kind of call people's attention to that, to pray for these people, tell them they're not alone. And we organized buses through SDOP to go. But a good number of our parishioners that went were undocumented. And I thought to myself, wow, they're going to the very
Right.
lion's den, right, to do this. But I think it's because they felt my life is hard, but look at those people. I got to do what I can to speak up for them. And I think we also felt safety in numbers. But there we were gathered around the little stage and we were singing and praying and we all had our candles. And it felt like a little glimpse of the kingdom of God. So in that moment, it felt like we were all safe.
Mm.
We were all brothers and sisters. We all had documents in that moment. And I think that's what has to give us hope, is that we don't wait for the kingdom of God to come when all things are good. We help realize and make the kingdom of God here and now through our trust in each other, through our locking arms and saying, this is who we are, and no one can take away our dignity. So I think that for me is where we get our faith and our hope, is by coming together and realizing something is made real that we didn't feel before we came together. When we were at home, when we're on our way, something comes real in those moments, that makes a difference. And that's why I think, I don't advocate people doing Zoom masses in this really challenging time, because now more than ever,
Mhm.
I think we need to be together in the same room so we feel I would say, our dignity and our power.
Mhm. Yeah. And this wasn't something that just you out of nowhere just decided to get involved and go to the ICE facility. Obviously, as a parishioner here, I've seen the evolution of this. Started certainly a few years ago with what you realized was a crisis that was happening with immigrants. Can you tell us about, I think, how that process has happened? Certainly, I think I've heard you say with all of us here at the church, through prayer, you identify sort of again where you get called to be, and I think you've
That's
made
right.
that clear that that's where you feel we're being called. But tell me about how a church like this, which by the way is in a lower income community, we still are. We don't have all the resources in the world, and yet we're becoming active on an issue like this, which again, it's also not the safest group of parishioners because we all have somebody we know in our
That's
families
right.
who could be at risk. So, how have you gone from supporting immigrants to now some of the advocacy that's happening around what's happening currently in our city, our state, and our country?
Yeah, those are great questions. So first of all, I go back to a question that our superior of our Jesuit community raised to us even before I moved into this community. I was the provincial at the time. He said, we haven't yet determined what it means to be a Jesuit community at the border. And I thought, oh, that's a good question, because it means that something ought to distinguish us as Jesuits at the border from Jesuits, in inland, Santa Clara or Sacramento or Portland, Oregon. We're 15 miles from the border with Tijuana, with Mexico. What's going to make us distinctive? And I would say the same question ought to be asked of Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish. What makes us a parish, a Jesuit parish at the border? How are we serving uniquely on this on the issue of immigration? Because the temptation is, to just run a nice parish. We have masses, we have confessions, we have weddings and baptisms. We iron the purificators; they're nice and starched. The chalices are polished, and that's it. But what does it mean to be here 15 miles from the border in a community that is low income and that is affected by border issues and by immigration status? It means, I think, getting our hands dirty and getting in the mix. And we were 2 years ago, we were warned really that there would be a lot of street releases of migrants and that they would be coming and knocking on our door.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh, what are we going to do? And I said that to the parishioners, what are we going to do? And people all said, Padre, we'll try to do something to receive them. So at first we were receiving them on our doorstep. And then there was too many, so we opened our Salon Tepeyac and we became a migrant shelter. And I can tell you at the beginning of that week, I didn't plan on opening a migrant shelter, but there we were.
Mm-hmm.
But it called us back to be that place of welcome that Our Lady of Guadalupe Parish here in San Diego has always been. It's always been an immigrant parish. It used to be the Mexican National Parish. And by now opening our doors to this group of new arrivals, I think we were saying to ourselves, we can't forget who we are and who we have been. We have to still be that welcoming community. So I was so proud of our parish, of our parishioners, for opening up Salon Tepeyac, for making the meals in their homes, for bringing blankets from their own homes. And I saw something new in us, which I think gave us new life. Well, then the new administration came this year, and that was no longer needed. So then, one day we went to court to stand with immigrants who were showing up for court. And it turned out to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
Standing with migrants who, as they showed up, had an influence on how things happen in the court, had an influence on ICE agents. So Bishop Pham asked us to continue doing that. So we're still doing that. And it was only through that going to court, that I realized that there's people being. So I think one thing sort of leads to another. And then I think I say to ourselves, aren't we supposed to do whatever we can do? That's what Ignatius says in the fourth week of the exercises. He says, the lover shares with the beloved whatever he or she possesses, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
The beloved shares with the lover whatever he or she possesses. So we are a struggling parish of immigrant people, but we realized that there were people in jail. And couldn't we raise our voices and at least pray for them? And everyone said, "Sí, Padre."
Yeah. And at minimum, perhaps give people back some dignity,
Yes.
given that they are being treated as criminals, and picked up from their workplace or off the street or close to schools now, for no reason, just because now, as a result of the rulings of courts, because of a way that you may look or that language you may speak, and by the way, picking up U.S. citizens along the way. So clearly, people feeling threatened, people feeling like devalued, I
That's
would
right.
imagine.
That's
I mean,
right.
I've had family members and siblings who have been jail, prison, and that for actually being part of activities in our community, and certainly have experienced the loss of potentially a little bit of dignity that brings. But when you haven't done anything wrong, you're trying to do everything by the books, except that unfortunately a bureaucratic system that has failed to meet the moment, which is what I call the lack of immigration laws that work and that are responsive to the real needs of our country. You're caught up in all this, and so there's got to be, again, just the loss of some dignity that, like, what are you worth when you're being treated as if you're worth nothing, and
That's
how
right.
you start questioning all that.
That's right.
Mhm.
And actually, when folks showed up to the federal building, even vulnerable people, and they raised their voices, they did feel like they gained their dignity back. They gained their voice back.
Mhm.
They felt like it doesn't matter. I don't have documents. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
My prayers count just like anyone else's. My voice is blending with the person next to me, and again, it goes back to also what you say, which is the voices against people's dignity are far too many and too strong.
Mhm.
And we have to find all those ways that reinforce the truth. And what is the truth? Is that each of us is made in the image and likeness of God.
Yeah. How do you keep that hope going, the momentum going, given that there seems to be no backing off of the current approach to how people are being treated, and certainly immigrants, which is a focus of the work that you're doing here, but a lot of other groups of people are also being threatened. How do you maintain that? I'll just share, from my weekly experience here, from the beginning, certainly of this year, where it started to feel really heavy. And as someone who is in a position to make decisions and of some power, if you will, as an elected representative, yeah, trying to do things to respond to the moment. And I think we've done quite a bit in the state to try and meet the moment, but there's limitations to that, and accepting that there's limitations to what we can do, and trying to find ways to, for example, pass laws so that people aren't being approached by masked individuals who don't have any identification. We pass that law because it's meaningful for the state, or they cannot be staged outside of schools or hospitals or daycares. Those are all laws that we pass, but I'm not sure that those are going to be laws that are going to be respected
Yeah,
given what we've seen. And
that's
so,
right.
you know, trying, I will say that throughout the course of the year of what we've experienced as parishioners here, I feel like I've been on a journey of feeling of hopelessness and despair, to trying to find where I fit in to all of this,
Mhm.
just like the individuals in the community who have attended some of the vigils and some of the other prayer services. I think we're all trying to find that. And so I worry about our community generally because I don't see them relenting on
Yeah,
what's happening. So
yeah,
you, as someone who is supposed to help all of us continue to be hopeful and faithful in something, how are you going to be able to bring that hope and faith to the followers of the church?
yeah. Well, good question. But I would say, in a way, the answer is simple. Might not be easy, but it's simple. Is every day I have to start my day, going back to the well, and the well is my prayer and my time with God, and a sense that God still calls me to this, and God is in it for me. And it doesn't mean that God's going to make it easy, but God is present with it. God is present in it for me. Um, the same way I'm sure you have to do. And then I also just go back to our story, which is the Christian story, which is Jesus had a pretty rough go of it. It did not end well for him. Why do we think it's going to end any easier for us? So he was caught between all these forces of his own people, the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the leaders of the church, not liking his messaging, looking to the Roman authorities to do their dirty work in a way, and he ended up on the low end of that deal. And I just feel like, um, well, in the words of St. Ignatius, it would be kind of a third week experience. The third week is the crucifixion of Jesus, and we pray to walk with him, our friend, in this really difficult time, to just walk with him, be with him, be with him, be with him. And that's what I think. That's We're in a time of the third week, where we just have to be with Jesus in the folks that are going through this, and be with him and be with him and be tireless in being with them. And that's gonna be where we find our way forward.
Yeah. And in waiting for the fourth week to come.
Yeah. And it will come.
Yeah.
And there's glimpses of it coming already, like that night at the federal building. That was a glimpse of the resurrection, the fourth week. But we're in a sea, an ocean of the third week,
Yeah.
where it's really a time of Jesus, the diminishment and the persecution of Jesus as found in our brothers and
Yeah.
sisters.
And what you refer to, I don't know if it's at this parish alone or if it's a Jesuit phrase that gets used, faith in action. That's what
Yes,
this is.
that's
It's
right.
putting what we believe into the work that we do as a community, but also in our everyday lives.
That's right.
What
That's
are
right.
some other examples of some of the faith in action that where we see either at this community, at this parish, or that you can point to? One that stands out for me that probably a lot of people know because it's quite well known is in Boyle Heights, where you actually served, I believe, at the
That's right.
parish there
Dolores
with
Mission.
Father Greg Boyle and Homeboy Industries, that they do some work out there. Um, faith in action is certainly happening. What are some of the other things that maybe people who are trying to find a way to put their faith into some action, and maybe this is not the right action, maybe they're not from San Diego and they can't be involved here. How else do people put faith into action?
Yeah, I think I go back to what Ignatius says is that true love is shown in action more than in words.
Mhm.
So it can be shown in words, but it's more shown more in action than in words. So I think it's not enough to say I love God and then not love my neighbor. That's scriptural. We have to put our love into action by loving our neighbor too. I think just about every parish has opportunities for people to put their love into action. It could be internal in the church. It could be serving as a Eucharistic minister or a lector. That's one way. I think we're called to even more radical ways, uh, donating money, food, clothing to people who don't have those things. That can be a simple way. Uh, but I think the best ways are when it's not just transactional like that, but relational, is spending time with people. Um, for example, volunteering to accompany people at court. We have this program called uh, Faithful Accompaniment and Trust and Hope. And people are choosing to spend their free time standing with people who are vulnerable. And a lot of the people that are volunteering don't speak Spanish. So there's not the verbal communication, but there's the communication of bodily presence.
Mhm.
That's putting faith into action.
I'm glad you said that because I've always told people you can make a difference no matter what you do. And
That's right.
I volunteered, for example, as PTA president. I volunteered as PTA secretary. Like there are so many needs in the community to serve the community in so many different ways, whether it's at a school, at a hospital, at a shelter, at a church, uh, doing things as simple as community cleanups. That all builds, in my opinion, community. It builds a little faith in humanity that it's still definitely there. And I think sometimes people fear that they're not skilled enough to do something. And like you just said, when in your faith program, folks go and accompany someone, they might not be able to communicate in the right language, but
That's
just
right.
their presence is significant enough. But there's all those ways to be
Yeah.
doing something for
There's
others.
all kinds of ways that are out there, and I think it's just a question of looking and trying to be, aware
Yeah.
and challenge yourself too. It's harder to put your it's easier just to show up to church and just go home, but it's not very fulfilling or fun.
Yeah.
It's much more fun to get together with other people and actually do something to help people.
So liturgically, we see some purple in the church because it
That's
is the
right.
Advent season, which is uh, we just ended the year last Sunday and began the new year. Also aligns with the calendar new year. I think it's a time of the year for a lot of people to be reflecting on their own faith or spirituality or the works that they are doing. What would be a message you like to share with people this time of the year? We talked about putting your faith into action, doing something, volunteering in some way. What are other good uh, uh, suggestions for people at this time of the year as we are feeling naturally, I think, hopeful,
Mhm.
but then January comes and then
That's
it
right.
feels like, okay, it's real again. Um, what are what's your advice?
Mm. I think my advice is, it might not feel like God is with you, but God is with you, and that's being tested right now. And no better test than the bleak month of January, to realize it's not about just the lights and the gifts at Christmas and the great food and the tamales, but it's really about everyday life and knowing that God is with us in everyday life. And um, there can be something exciting about that in the unromantic and unsexy time of January, realizing that right there, smack dab in there, God finds us. And I would say just being present to our own emptiness or bleakness in that time and letting God find us in the middle of that. That can be, in and of itself, fulfilling.
I'd like to end our conversation and want to thank you again
Of
for
course.
having this time with us and sharing with folks, probably in a non-traditional podcast setting. These are conversations with people who I come across in our community, things that are certainly personal, but also hopefully meaningful to others. As a person of faith in politics, I will tell you, I'll share with you, it's there are definitely some trying moments for sure of trying to always do what you think is right. But all of us, as we said earlier, face decisions that we must make as a society in general. Where do you see, and maybe what have you experienced here, people seeking faith in moments like these, um, that we're living in, and where that fits into who they are? And why should someone look to their community of faith, whatever that is, in order to find some of the fulfillment that perhaps um, is they feel is lacking in some way?
Yeah, well, I think the most satisfying uh, thing we can have is some sense of God and the divine, and our religious self seeks that. And what I think what's great about what you do, David, is that you don't separate your person as a person of faith from your civic self. You realize that in the person of who you are, you can't separate your faith from what you do every day. So I think that makes me believe actually in the work of our civil servants and politicians, that there are people that are really not separating church and state in their internal
Mhm.
self. I'm I'm very sure that your fullest expression of your beliefs and values often can't be felt in the laws that you pass.
Mhm.
That it's the laws that you pass are but a limited, version of some of the values that you hold. But at least you're standing in there and trying, and that gives me a lot of hope. So I just want to end on the note of really saying to all of us, we do the best we can in this imperfect world as people who are faithful, who are hungering for God. In an imperfect world, we try to make a difference, and it's never a perfect difference, but we have to believe we do make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what uh, keeps us motivated and going.
Yeah,
All of us in the
yeah,
work that we do.
that's right.
You've gotta feel that sense of fulfillment that there's a difference being made, and there is. And I think I want to end with that. That no matter what we all have a place in this world, and no matter what you're doing, what line of work you are in, you're making a difference for someone.
That's right.
And some of us get to write laws to do that. Some of us lead faith communities. Some of us are, we have educators, we have people who care for the elderly, making a difference. And want to thank everybody who does that, and really appreciative of that fabric of society that I hope continues to remain strong. And I think it will, with those values in mind. So once again, thank you so
Yeah,
much
you're
for the
very welcome,
conversation.
David. My
It's
pleasure.
been an
My
honor.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you on Sunday.
Yes. Father Scott, thank you. Thank you. I really needed this conversation, and I think a lot of our viewers might have as well. Here's what I'm taking with me: faith isn't just something that you have, it's something that you do. It shows up in how you treat others, how you treat people, all people. It shows up in what you fight for, it shows up in whether you're there when it matters for others. This holiday season, and really all the time of the year, as we gather with people that we love, I hope that we will ask ourselves, what do I believe? And what can people around me tell about what I believe? If this conversation meant something to you, please share it. Send it to someone who might be searching or someone who needs to be reminded that faith, whatever that means to them, can be a force for good. From my family to yours, happy holidays. And for those who celebrate, Merry Christmas. I'm David Alvarez. This has been Dreaming Big, Working Hard. Keep dreaming, keep working, and keep showing up.